So my name, Ratnadharani gave me my name, and yeah, it's a like all names that they're quite big. So it's she whose wisdom is compassion. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Lovely.
So folks, I'll just tell you a little bit around what has been on my mind. You know, I love that. That's so funny. A curious mind. Maybe that will become clearer as I ramble on. Let's see. Um, I wanted to start with sharing a bit of a memory because that's basically, I meditated this morning. I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to say apart from giving you a list of practicalities? And this is what has sort of come together, you know. So the memory was of being in India and walking along the road, and there being sort of cows and also an occasional pig going about in the road. And here I'm living in Wales, which is extremely quiet, very, very rural. But this was 2013, and every aspect of one's senses was alive, from the seeing and the smelling and the colour and the jostling. Vendors on all bits of the road, different spices, people sweeping different aspects of the road, so a lot of dust, um, and a lot of garbage as well, like rubbish, and a lot of wild dogs as well, quite thin around the place. So yeah, so this rich image of India came to mind. And I was there in 2013 because it was an order convention. And that was the first time I'd been back to India since I was 13. So I lived in India for 9 years, and that was the first time I'd gone back there. And I'll say a bit about that later. So I think, yeah, it's sort of like a contrast. I left India at 13. I think life was sort of falling apart for my family. And yet here I was in 2013 in a sea of blue. So there were a number of Indian order members. It was a Triratna order convention in India. And the sea of blue was predominantly people were wearing blue. Not everyone, because everyone's different in our order. No matter whether one would be encouraged, people would also just do their own thing. But overall, there was a sea of blue within the kind of world happening in every inch of the scene, life happening in its fullness. So I wanted to, yeah, sort of evoke that because I think that was, um, we have these sort of peak experiences that don't leave us. That was quite a key one. So there I was with the order, and we were walking to the temple to Bodh Gaya, and it just became very clear to me. I've never had that kind of thought about why pilgrimage is important, why it's really important to go to kind of sacred places. And why it was so important in a peak experience was the energy there was electric. So there was this contradiction between a level of poverty and a level of kind of um, yeah, sort of, dirt everywhere, kids sometimes, rummaging through the rubbish. This big contrast between life at its edges, and then this amazing temple where a number of people had pilgrimaged, had gone on a journey to, not just our own order, but a lot of different Buddhist traditions, Thai, um, I imagine Japanese. I definitely saw a lot of Tibetans, obviously Indian, different Indian sects of Buddhism. So there we were sort of circumambulating, chanting, um, with a very, very tangible sense of the Buddha there. So yeah, so this memory kind of came to mind when I was thinking of this group, because I remember just being in contact. So there we were, sort of a little bit in time and space, circumambulating with all different groups. Um, and being sort of part of Triratna, so being a particular kind of like 500 of us trying to circumambulate, and also feeling like I was in contact with something timeless, which was why I was saying kind of journeying or doing a pilgrimage to a sacred place. It can help open up, take us out of our sort of mundane kind of experience or everyday experience into something kind of quite tangible. So that was a very strong experience. And as I was walking around, like I think I was crying, and I couldn't quite figure out why I was crying, apart from I was just in contact with, oh yes, this is really possible. This is real. Awakening is real, and something happened at this place that even I can be in contact with. And I'm not naturally one of those people who feel energies in places. I've never seen anyone's aura. I've not seen a ghost. It's not a normal way of me responding to the world. Fairly down to earth in some ways. So so I realised that was like the second happiest like peak experience point in my life, being there with the order. And I think what also made that quite incredible, because logically you start to think, well, what was it that made that experience so visceral? And I sort of realized, thinking to myself, that there was about 500 order members there. I had only been ordained 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, less than 5 years, but there was a number of people that had been ordained much longer than that, like 30 plus years. And I just thought, if each person roughly had been practicing for 5 years, you've almost got 2,500 years of practice about the time of when the Buddha was around. And I think you could kind of touch into that. So there's a specific practice we do at ordination, but also into the order, which is a refuge tree practice, or the tree of refuge and respect. And generally involves some prostrations, bowing in some form, in a way opening to something that goes beyond us. And it wasn't even possible to do that because we were so squashed together. Like when I tried to bend down, my head was in someone's bum. It's like that's how close we were in this, because there were so many people practicing. But I think it was that kind of energy. And I wanted to share that because I think a word was coined from that experience. So I just thought I was having that experience, very, very strong experience. But then sometimes when you end up talking about it with friends, you sort of realize actually it was just shared experience. And I'm sure maybe after this, Aryapada could say something about that. This term Sangakaya was kind of coined from that experience, which is when there's like a coincidence of will, something greater than the sum of its parts come to mind. And apparently the Buddha said, when the Sangha attains to greatness, now whatever greatness means, it probably means spiritual progress. When the Sangha attains to greatness, I will kind of honor the Sangha. So the Sangha is, one of the 3 jewels. So we wear these cases. I don't know if everyone knows about it, but the Buddha jewel is like the yellow one, and the Sangha jewel is the red one, and the Dharma jewel is the blue one, and it's on this kind of red lotus. So it's sort of like on a lotus of love are these sort of 3 jewels. Well, that's my interpretation. There might be another one. Anyway, the 3 jewels are held as the highest. And what also became clear to me at that point more clearly was Sangharakshita, the founder of the movement, his vision. So there we were, men and women being equal. So I know you've looked at the 6 distinctive emphasis. We talk about unity. So there's 2 wings to the movement. So here's a women's deepening, they're going for refuge center, and then there's Padmaloka. But we are unified. We're like one order. So there were monks videoing us because they were like Indian Dharmacharinis, Indian order members, sort of taking the whole order, the people that were there, 500 people, through a ritual, and it still isn't super common for that to kind of happen. And at the same time, people couldn't really make sense of us because we were neither monastic, so living in a monastery, we basically just were quite different clothing, Western, Indian, beyond, with a kesa. And neither were we lay, so neither were we completely householders. And I think the magic of that really came out. So I'll call Sangharakshita Bante, which means teacher, because it sort of feels more appropriate for me to say that rather than it feels, yeah, it makes more sense for me to say that than Sangharakshita feels very formal and distant. Um, so when you look to the distinctive emphasis, I think going for refuge is, so our commitment is primary and our lifestyle is secondary. I think that is quite a radical way of looking at it. So I can be deeply committed to a Buddhist movement and order and live my life in a certain way, yet not sign up to something that I'm probably not up to, which would be like chastity or being a nun. You know, I don't know if that would really. I don't know whether that would lead to greater wholeness at the minute, if you see what I mean. I think I'd end up denying parts of myself to kind of live a certain lifestyle, which wouldn't then lead myself to greater freedom. So, for example, some of Bante's teachers were also married, or had what you would call consorts, if you see what I mean. So anyway, so I wanted to share that because I guess I just wanted to share the happiest, one of the second happiest times of my life. And therefore, what was the first, I wanted to share that with you as well, because this has just been what's been on my mind. So I live in a context where ordination is quite primary, if you see what I mean. So I'm helping women to be ordained, and that's what it means to wear a case. It means you've been ordained by a public preceptor, and just thought you might be interested in it. So I'll just share that. So ordination comprises of two parts. Like there's a private part. So Ratnadharani, as Aryapala said, gave me my name and gave me a certain meditation practice, and very importantly gave me the 10 precepts actually. So that's what one's taking on when one asks for ordination or wants to join the order. And then the ordination has two parts to it. The private part, where it's you walking alone. So my own private ordination, I thought was going to be like the happiest day, but actually I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear of whether I was really up to it. So I had to kind of get ordained with this bit in me kind of thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to let down someone very important in my life, which is Ratnadharani. So I had to sort of, in a way, you build up to a very special occasion and you think it's going to be a certain way, even if you haven't envisaged it. And then actually it's not quite like that. I just had to get ordained with a bit of doubt in there, which was disappointing, to say the least, But anyway, there was enough of a momentum behind my practice to just do it, to not let that stop me. But what was then like the happiest was the public ordination, which is where you get to hear everyone else's names, which is almost like you get to hear their true names, who they really are, like at their highest. And because I was able to go on a longer ordination retreat, I've been living with those women for about 2 months. So it was like when I heard their names, I recognized something of their deepest potential. And there's something about hearing a bit the truth that kind of can lead to a sense of wholeness and a sort of contentment, which is beyond the usual ways we get pleasure or even how we think of happiness, actually. And also, I just thought, I think I can do it with others. So there was something about, actually, it felt like, yes, this is doable because I'm doing it alongside my sisters. And not just my sisters, I'll be going back to my Sangha, my community. So I just remember it just that the day just getting better and better, and then, So I wanted to sort of share that and then just sort of wind backward to how those conditions came together. So Yeah, so I shared that I left India when I was 13. So basically, I was born in the UK. I was born in Essex, actually, and we, as a family, migrated out to India. So I'm half Indian. My dad's Indian. We migrated out to India when I was 4, and I lived there to the age of 13. And I absolutely loved India. I've sort of felt like that was my identity, or if you see what I mean, if someone would have asked me who I was, I'd probably say, look, I'm Indian. But I wasn't quite Indian because I'm not completely Indian, and that's obvious, probably to people in India, as to other folks as well. And also, as I was sort of describing, there was quite a degree of poverty and suffering there. So life is much less what would be the word, sanitized. It's all out there. It's all out there on kind of display. So there was quite a lot of suffering, and my mum, was white, so that meant that we got a certain amount of attention, which wasn't super helpful in a way. So I think there was a lot of suffering, and a way of managing it was to kind of turn away from it, or not see what was there, not see color, not see difference, but yet it was all sort of going on. So we migrated back, my mum and my brother, when the marriage was sort of breaking down quite spectacularly. And there were sort of issues of addiction, a bit of violence, and what have you. Just a lot of complexity, I think, that can come from different cultures coming together as well. So there can be a lot of beauty, and there can be a lot of difference and difficulty as well. So I came back at the age of 13, and I think I was sort of trying to make sense of the world. So the world didn't really make sense, and I don't think I made sense either. I don't think anything really made sense. But it wasn't until actually I finished my psychology degree, and I was in Colchester, which is where I came across the Colchester Buddhist Centre, where I was actively searching for something. So in a way, at that point, I was 24, and at that point, one could probably say I was living like a happy life. Yeah, I was doing a training to be an occupational therapist. I got my degree, but I was deeply dissatisfied, I think, and I think I knew that there must be something more. So I don't think that the psychology degree had given me the answers that I thought I could find. And I think I grew up in a mixture of Catholic kind of conditioning, where there was quite a lot of guilt. That's just my perception of it. There's many positive things to it as well, but quite a lot of guilt and quite a lot of shame. And Indian Sikh background, but predominantly I lived in a Hindu background in terms of culturally. So there was quite a lot of what women do and what they don't do, how you are and how you aren't, very, very implicit kind of conditionings of how to be within yourself. And then when I came back to England, I probably felt a degree of freedom, because actually I think my prospects were mainly I was going to get married and I was going to have kids. I don't think I had. I think that was in a way what was expected of me in the trajectory that my life could take. So it was sort of frightening not thinking, not having that in place and not going down that line. There was something both freeing and quite frightening about it at the same time, I think. So so I decided that I needed to search for something, because I had lost belief in God. Basically, I didn't really think, given the level of difficulties there were in the world, but in a way, my conception of God could no longer hold why that would be the case, and there'd be a level of suffering and children suffering and stuff like that. Yet at the same time, I also knew that there was something more. So it was like I needed to kind of find it. I knew there wasn't nothing actually. Um, I'm definitely more of an eternalist than a nihilist. So I knew that there was something more, and I felt like I wanted to find it. And when I came across the Colchester Buddhist Centre, so I was 24 years of age, I'd finished university, I'd got a little bit involved in the drug scene there, because I wasn't an individual, my friends were involved in that. But actually, what that had done was it made me more anxious. And probably there was a level of anxiety in my experience that I wasn't in contact with, but it really brought it to the surface. So I think, in a way, probably my mental health wasn't at its optimal. I think, and I think definitely doing drugs didn't help that. So when I came across the center, it was like entering a world where more was possible. I think people communicated, or the atmosphere there was something that I'd been really searching for, which maybe I'd even had a glimpse through taking, uh, um, you know, I wasn't heavily into drugs, just to say, actually, but it would open up a bit of a world. But there, it felt like the world was there without a kind of come down, or without that something more was sort of possible. And Aryapala knows the person. There was a lane. So I went at the window and had a look, and I thought, I'm just going to do yoga. I'm going to do yoga at this thing. I wasn't interested in Buddhism, but I did want to meditate. And this mad woman came out with multicolored hair and this limp. It was slightly frightening. So she came towards me with purpose and tried to invite me in, but I was a bit too scared to go in. So I was like, no, I'm not going in. Multicolored dress. But there was something about how she was that made it possible to think I could go there by myself, because I never would have gone anywhere by myself either, because that wasn't quite done, or quite a lot of Indian conditioning. I'd always go somewhere with someone else. I wouldn't just wander around by myself, because it wouldn't have been a very safe thing to do as well in the past, I think. So she made it possible. So I actually turned up there by myself, and then ended up having an argument with Harsha Prabha, who's another order member that Aryapala knows. So somewhere I must have been feeling more at home there. It was about the ethical precepts and kind of harm and abortion and women's rights, and I kind of got a bit into what I thought was the case. But I still managed to come back. Like, people were able to kind of take me a bit how I was, which was probably fairly weird. And I sort of feel eternally grateful for that. So I think I'd had a vision of something more was possible, and then that answered something of it, even though I was fairly determined that I didn't want to be a Buddhist, and I wasn't going to give up eating meat, and I wasn't going to change. I think I was quite determined about that. But little by little, I think there was the magic of just chanting the precepts, which I think you guys might be going on to. I think little by little, the whole atmosphere and the culture started to change me on levels. And then 2 years after that, I asked for ordination, because I realized, so I became a mitra. I became a mitra because I think I realized that I did need to change, and I realized that I wanted to commit to a path of training. Um, uh, and there was something about just realizing that I needed to go for refuge. We talk about that, to something that went beyond me. And I think my habitual ways of trying to find it in relationships, it was just never really going to work. So I needed something much bigger. And the three jewels, even though it didn't completely make sense to me because I didn't understand deeply enough, I had an intuitive response that that is what I needed to do. And Samantha Badri really encouraged me to do it. So I probably wouldn't have done it without encouragement, actually, but she encouraged me, and it just made sense. I sort of knew that that was what I wanted to do. And then after doing that and engaging in a bit of study, I realized that I just really wanted to commit myself more deeply. And it felt like there was a limit, being a mitra, with what I could do and what was available to me. So Bhante talks about, and you guys, you might study this at some point. It's a really good series, Buddhism for Today and Tomorrow. And he talks about a method of personal development. So I realized that I really needed to tread a path with other people that were trying to be as committed as me. It's that sort of atmosphere that comes into being when there's a level of kind of shared vision. So I needed to engage in a method of development, and I needed conditions to allow that vision of what I sort of knew to be true. I needed sort of conditions to kind of really live that out. And in that series, Bhante talks about a method of development, a vision of human existence, a nucleus of new society, and a blueprint for a new world. And I was very excited by that, because although I really needed to change and really get my act together, and I wanted to suffer less, actually, my states of mind sometimes would really deteriorate and become kind of quite enemy like. I also really wanted to help others, and I wanted to be part of something like that that could make the world a better place, that could try and help alleviate suffering. Actually, I really, really wanted to be part of that. So in a way, this movement seemed to offer me a way of developing, which is what I really needed, and to work with myself, but also to do it with others who, some of them were just so much further down the path. It just became clearer about what was possible, and also to help be part of changing the world. So that was why I asked for ordination. That's also partly why I'm here. But just very, very quickly, a couple of working grounds. So I really had to work on self-doubt, even in the kuti with my preceptor. Then I managed to keep going, but self-doubt was quite a big working ground of whether I could do it, whether I was up for it. And a dharmic framework really helped. It really helped to be able to look at my experience in line with the Dharma. So even thinking like I'm the worst person, I realized was a form of conceit and a way of solidifying where I was in relation to the world. Um, that was really, really helpful to sort of realize that I'm not out of the hook, even if I'm giving myself a hard time. In fact, I'm still in the self and other framework while I'm doing that. I mean, it might sound obvious to you, but it was like, oh, it wasn't to me at the time. And I think being able to be friends with folk who could communicate better and were more comfortable in their own skin and could stay home, actually knew how they were, rather than were living a few meters from their own body, if that makes any sense, really helped me work with a degree of anxiety. I think that was kind of around my being around safety and lack of safety, and probably cultural differences as well, I think. And particularly what helped there was working in a way with the gap. Does the gap make, the gap might not make any sense. So I think what I thought was I would practice, and then I wouldn't have some of the experiences I didn't want to have. That's what I thought. If I was practicing for real, I would be able to get rid of all suffering in my life and basically just be happier. End of story. And what practice helped me see was I was coming with a lot of conditioning, and that conditioning would still, I would still feel that in my body. That wasn't where the gap was. The gap was not acting from it, you know. So I sort of had to really understand in a way what ethical practice was about, and what we talk about it as karma. Karma are actions, and karma vipaka, the fruits of our actions. That in a way, I didn't need to deepen the grooves of self-hatred. I didn't need to deepen the grooves of anxiety. I didn't need to deepen the grooves of separation and isolation that I could feel. But I still would have to feel it. I'd have to feel it, you know, and not act from it. And that in a way grew me. And I could kind of ripen into readiness to join the order. But so there were some sort of core things of really understanding the Dharma and being able to see it lived out by my friends, but also reflect on it in the light of my own experience, where I could really, I think, become more whole, or become more human, even, probably is more the truth of the matter. So I could just say I joined the order because it really gave me a path, and it gave friends to be alongside, both vertically. So I'm very lucky to have people in my life, and because of my Indian conditioning, I can look up to people quite easily. But they're people that I look up to, that I've known over a period of life, through thick and thin, which means a lot. And there's also people that peers. So I've kind of got both in my life that really help me to kind of keep going and galvanize the will to practice, to not settle back, because those tendencies still call. And I think the order is a context within which I've been able to change, but I also want to pass that on to others. So I feel a lot of gratitude for what I've received. And there's a certain degree of communication. So that experience of Bodh Gaya was also an experience of communication. It was like Buddha speaking to me on the conditions of all of us there practicing together. And my ordination, again, everyone being together on the same page, wanting to work to make the world a better place, but transform themselves. It's sort of, I wanted to join the order to kind of, yeah, allow a deeper communication or interconnection to unfold. So that's it. That's what I hope. I don't know how long I've gone on for.